Welcome back to the D1Softball podcast, part of the Learfield Family and Varsity Network. I'm Jenna Becerra, along with my amazing co-host, Amanda Lorenz. And before we jump in, a quick reminder that when you're out of town and you want to keep up with live college sports, be sure to download the free Varsity Network app, available for both Apple and Android. Get your games on the go with the Varsity Network app. And actually, this helps some people out. If there's ever an issue with an ESPN stream or something like that, you can tune in, and sometimes there's radio or other coverage of it. So don't forget it. And Amanda, I don't even know where to start, to be honest, for this last week. But I'm sure that you've been pretty locked in throughout all the craziness that's going on.
Yes, we have definitely settled into some conference play now. I feel like this is when I get my groove on of like being able to watch all the games that I want to. And it felt like I was glued to my phone watching so many games this weekend, so many good games, so many good series. And gosh, it feels good to be back in the swing of things.
It sure does. Oh my goodness. I can't believe it's March in some ways, but also it's only March in other ways. I don't know.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Here we are.
For today's lineup, we'll talk through the new top 25 rankings, and then we're going to talk about week 5. So much happened that Amanda and I are actually going to dive a little bit deeper this week. Yes. And then, of course, our plays of the week and our win and whiff of the week. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's get into it.
All right, let's start with the top 25. So the top 3 really remain the same. If we want to just go ahead and look at what the top 25 looks like right now. So Oklahoma keeps their number 1 spot after they swept South Carolina in their first ever SEC series in program history. Texas and Florida are at number 2 and number 3, respectively, still. And actually, the rest of the top 6 are also from the SEC now. Number 4, LSU, 5, Tennessee. They both rose a little bit. While number 6, Texas A&M fell 1 spot after dropping an SEC series to Florida at home, which, I mean, to be fair, a very tough series. Mm-hmm. But then if you're looking at the rest of the top 10, you'll see some Big Ten. Number 7, UCLA, number 8, Oregon are the top ranked teams outside of the SEC. And Oregon also getting those couple of wins over Florida State at home, contributing to that. And then 2 brand new teams to the poll, number 20, Ole Miss, and number 21, UCF. Ole Miss, of course, took the series against Arkansas, and UCF went to Arizona and opened Big 12 play with a series win over Arizona. So still 5 conferences represented, SEC still leading with 13 out of 15 teams in the poll, so about half the top 25. Then the ACC and Big 12 have 4 teams each, the Big 10 with 3, and then Conference USA still holding on with Liberty there at number 25. All right, so that's a lot. So, Amanda, when you first look at it, gut reactions to this week's updates?
Yeah, I think that I like this poll a lot. I think we're starting to settle in a little bit of having more than just, a few games to go off of. And obviously what sticks out to me is Oklahoma still being the only team unbeaten. So many fresh faces on that starting lineup. Still learning some names, yet they're still the Oklahoma we know and love, and they just win. So that sticks out to me. I'm excited to see Oregon moving up, and I feel like they've just been a steady climber. And so that's fun to see. But those are the few things that stick out to me.
Yeah, I feel like Oregon pleasantly surprised a lot of people so far this season. Obviously, a lot left. But, a lot of changes with the realignment. There was some movement, transfers, just different things happening for a lot of programs. Oregon being one of them who was affected by those types of things. Sure. But they've really started off really, really well. You wouldn't have even guessed had you not known that context.
Yeah.
I think one question that we often get to is, how does this stack up with RPI? Of course, now that we're starting to get enough data to be able to look at RPI and take into account strength of schedule and things like that. So to give some background, because I know there's a lot of chatter, especially around the top 3 teams, because I think every fan base could give an argument for why either Oklahoma, Texas, or Florida could, in theory, take that number 1 spot. But it lines up, obviously, like we said, OU, Texas, Florida right now. The top 3 for RPI. So Texas is actually at number 14 in RPI. This is through Monday, so including the final games of the first SEC series. OU is number 15 in RPI, and Florida is actually number 1. So just keep that context in mind as we continue to talk through, since those 3 have been the most consistent probably throughout the poll. And then a couple of fun facts that I found interesting. So some ranked teams that are not in the top 25 in terms of RPI. Tennessee's at number 27, Nebraska is at number 39, and Liberty's at number 40 for RPI specifically. So with those 3 spots, teams that are not ranked, but they are in the top 25 RPI include number 17, Georgia Tech, number 22, Cal, and number 25, Coastal Carolina. So I'd say these are just some teams to keep an eye on also as we move forward throughout the season. Just because we haven't seen some folks in this top 25 yet doesn't mean that that won't change the rest of the way.
Exactly. Super interesting.
Yeah. The data always gets to be, a little extra spice for us at this time of year because it's still at the end of the year. Of course, it always just matters who ends up there at the end, but it's super interesting in the meantime for us to go through it.
Very.
But then, Amanda, if I look at number 24, for example, so there's Alabama, I think of the AUSL because we just found out the schedule for this summer, including your Volts, where you guys will be playing. And one of the college stadiums that the AUSL will be playing this summer is Alabama. Also, Wichita State, which is very familiar with AU, and Utah, too, just to name a few. But I wanted to ask you, how does it feel to have the support from some of these college teams, for all of you on that pro level?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, right? I think of just the fan bases that come along with it. I'm really excited for some of our athletes to be able to play in their own college stadiums again. Like the thought of Montana Fouts. Obviously, I'm going to be playing Montana Fouts, so all these fans are going to be rooting against my squad. Hopefully, not too much because we do have Kelly Crutchman in some Volts gear. So hopefully they'll show an equal amount of love, but I know the Alabama fans love them some Montana Fouts. So really excited just for our athletes being able to go back home and then just hopefully getting that same fan support. I'm pretty confident that the fans are going to show up and be excited to see some pro softball, see Montana compete at the Rhodes House and in all her glory. So I'm super excited for that. And then Hannah Flippin, Mariah Lopez, and Anissa Ortez also getting to play in their home stadium in Utah. I'm really excited for them as well. I just think it's really special. You always think like, I'll never get the opportunity to play here again. So just to come in a different phase of your life is like really, really cool just to play in a place that felt like home for a long time and probably still does feel like home, and then seeing some familiar faces along the way. So I'm really excited for our people to get to experience that.
I can't wait to watch all of you guys. I mean, even Sydney McKinney with like Wichita State, right? And in the past, Athletes Unlimited has competed there before. And I remember asking her about that. And she was basically just overwhelmed. Like there's a special amount of pride that goes along with that.
Totally. So gonna be round 2 for her, and then Kelsey Stewart. Obviously, she's from Wichita, so for her to be able to go back and have a few games there, just really special playing in front of her family. And obviously, she's a mom of 2, and currently she lives in Wichita. So just think about how much easier that's going to be on her family. I'm definitely super excited for her.
It's going to be really fun just to watch, let alone I'm sure y'all will have so much fun playing. But I know you mentioned the Rhodes House specifically, but where are you most excited to play with the Vols this year? Because obviously some other fields too, from minor league teams and other types of support as well mixed in.
Oh, I think I'm really excited to go to Austin, Texas. I love Austin, so excited to play there. Excited to see how the fans will show up in Texas, but I am really excited about playing in Alabama. I love Tuscaloosa. I think Tuscaloosa is a really cool place. Every time I'm there, the fans definitely show up. So I'm really hoping that the fans show up for pro softball. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt that they will. I remember playing super regionals at Alabama my junior year, and then also returning for regionals to call the games back in 2022. So this is when like Stanford was there and a couple other teams. And it's just a special atmosphere. Like that is the type of thing that I remember you saying when you first went to Florida and you went to these different places in the SEC, you were like, we get to do this every weekend. It's like, yes,
Yes. So surreal. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm hoping that, it's not going to be as hostile. Like they're not going to be
true
yelling names and, really wishing the worst on me. So I think it's going to be a little bit more welcoming this time. So,
yeah.
But I don't know if I love or hate that. I kind of like the environment of them, hating us and wanting us to lose. So we'll see. I think I'll welcome both of it.
You're so right though with Kelly and then with Montana. Maybe it'll separate the like more recent Alabama fans from the OG fans a little bit. Sure. We'll see how that happens. Well, so exciting. So exciting. And in the meantime, we do have, and we've had some awesome matchups, of course, within the college softball world, but always love to see those ties. And I think when you and I were first talking about everything that was going on this past weekend, there were a couple that you mentioned, so maybe we start there, but let's go ahead and get into the week 5 recap. Okay, Amanda, I know there were a couple in particular that you were like, win of the week, like, because they were such interesting series. So let's just start with the ones that stood out to you.
Yeah, I would say like the big series wins that, just stood out to me. Obviously, UCF going on the road and taking 2 of 3 from Arizona, who is a really good team this year. And like there's much more to that, right? Like definitely a different climate than Florida. They're traveling across the country for this Big 12 series, which is a little wild. They have a really long travel day going into Arizona, taking 2 of 3 from a really good Arizona team. And then you have Ole Miss hosting Arkansas and taking 2 of 3 from Arkansas and kind of putting it on them. Obviously, Arkansas had a big response in game 3, as did Arizona. They had a big response in game 3 as well. But those 2 series were like, if you asked my prediction, I was like, no doubt Arizona and no doubt Arkansas. And obviously, UCF and Ole Miss had something to say about that. So those were 2 like shockers for me that were like definitely the wins of the week in sense that I didn't think that would happen. And that being said, we had definitely a bunch of other series that were so crazy, and I would love to talk about those as well. But those 2 stood out for me as like, whoa, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, from experience, I will say it is hard to win in Tucson.
Sure.
It is not easy to play in that environment. I don't know if I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if we ever did it during my time at Stanford. I mean, yes, got some wins at home and things, but to win in Tucson, not the easiest thing to do. So I was definitely impressed by that. And it being the highest ranked win in UCF program history says something. And also I think something about the Big 12 in general, when there were no sweeps the first week for Big 12 play, and not the case for the other power conferences. So I think it says something about what that conference is going to be, and maybe it's going to be a little bit chaotic, which hey, we don't necessarily mind that.
Gives us more to talk about.
Exactly. So I agree with you. I thought that was definitely an interesting highlight from this week. And then you mentioned Ole Miss-Arkansas, of course. The fact that Arkansas, they only had 1 loss going in. Of course, we were all talking about South Carolina and OU being undefeated, but just the 1 loss. And I would say, got to give credit though. Lexi Brady rakes for Ole Miss. 625 on the weekend, 5 hits, 4 RBIs, couple of home runs versus Arkansas. So got to give her credit for that. And the confidence that must be building to be able to do it in your own house the way that they did. But I'm glad that you mentioned too the statement that Arkansas made in game 3 and Arizona run rolls. 20-3 Arkansas won, because that says something as well. Like it's really hard to sweep, very hard to sweep. But the fact that, these are good teams. They're not going to just roll over by any means. And then we even saw that, which we'll get into in a little bit, but we saw that with Texas Tech and Oklahoma State too. Oklahoma State run rolling that game 3. So, but you know what? Brie Ellis, I feel like we can't talk about Arkansas without mentioning the fact that just Brie Ellis is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, leading the nation, home runs, on base percentage, slugging. It's just, she's fun to watch. So we'll keep an eye on both of those teams the rest of SEC play.
Love it.
And then maybe we get into, since I mentioned a couple, South Carolina, OU, Texas, Oklahoma State. South Carolina and OU, maybe we start there with these two, because our interview with Ashley Chastain Woodard last week was illuminating, right? Like South Carolina, we still are in awe, I think, you and I, of how they've been able to start with this huge transition year. Mm-hmm. And then, first series is not only OU, but it's in Norman, and they had every game within one run. I still think that's worth noting for this South Carolina team.
Yeah, it was definitely not the sweep that OU is used to, right? A sweep is a really hard thing to do. They won 3 one-run ball games. That means that South Carolina was competing and throwing punches the whole time. Obviously, the first 2 games they end in lots of runs, basically a home run derby, 10-9 for game 1 and game 2. And then you have game 3 ending 2-1, I believe. So just obviously another 1-run game, but much different than the previous 2 games. But just really props to both teams. Both teams are completely different, and both teams are going in there in a weird way, a transition for OU too, right? Like having lost so many of their usual starters, and South Carolina, a huge program shift and transition to a new leader and so many things. But really cool to see South Carolina walk in there like ready to roll. And like Ashley Chastain had said last week, like she feels like, she tries to make her kids believe and know that they can beat anybody. So they walk into the game thinking they are going to win and believing it. And that's a different feeling. But you can say that you can fake it till you make it a few times, right? Like you can say, oh yeah, we're going to beat the 4-time national championships back. Like, yeah, we're going to walk in here like we're going to beat you. Easier said than done, right? But like you could tell that squad really believed it with the way that they competed. Like anytime they were down, they were not out. Like they had no problem fighting back and throwing punches. It was really fun to see. I have not seen this brand of South Carolina softball ever since my time being a softball fan. So really fun to see them walk in there. It's different, and it's really fun to watch them compete. Also really fun for these OU youngsters to see them compete, right? To see them show up and stay to that standard that is Oklahoma softball, that championship mindset that they talk about. So it was really entertaining, I think, and because it was a lot of new faces, new brand of softball, but really good softball too. It was fun to watch.
Yeah, super fun to watch. I couldn't agree more. And I think you mentioned some of the youngsters with OU too. Gabby Garcia is one example. So she's actually D1Softball's National Freshman of the Week. She got a hit in every game of the series against South Carolina, and she had the walk-off double on Sunday in that tighter game, like you said, Amanda. And she hit .455 on the weekend with a couple of home runs, 5 RBIs, and a stolen base. I think those youngsters, they didn't have necessarily the same type of pressure that maybe that senior class did last year, where they're like, are we going to do it all 4 years? But it's a different kind of pressure where it's like you said, the standards are there. It's easy to kind of fall into the trap of feeling like, we have to fill certain people's shoes now that they're gone, versus kind of making it your own. So I do give them credit for, dealing with some of that type of pressure that comes along with being a part of OU. And if this is OU's quote unquote rebuilding year, when they're still number 1 and still undefeated, that's just a testament to the way that the program has evolved over the years under Patty Gasso. But I wouldn't even call it rebuilding necessarily, but if someone were to, it speaks volumes.
Yeah.
And then, Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. We talked about the third game. So obviously Texas Tech took the series, not necessarily how the rankings would have predicted it. Same thing with some of these other series we've mentioned. But that last game, Oklahoma State run ruling, just like Arkansas and Arizona did. So the bounce back was there. But I think one thing that stood out to me, other than, of course, I mean, Nigel Kennedy being Nigel Kennedy, is double headers in conference play are really hard. So the fact that they played 2 games on Friday, they didn't play Saturday, and then they played 1 on Sunday. And that has to do with like weather, and they're trying to make sure they get the games in, and you got to do what you got to do. But double headers, especially when it's the same team. Of course, you play double headers in preseason, but the same team during conference play, that is not easy. So that was impressive by Texas Tech to be able to take both.
Sure. I feel like it always works. Winning the first one is really important because it's much easier to carry that momentum and then much harder to have a 30-minute window to flip the script. Obviously, our game plan for game 1 did not work. How do we flip the script against maybe a new pitcher or just a new mindset heading into game 2? But when you get your butt kicked in game 1, and then you know that 30 minutes you have to get around and play another one in a big conference game that means a lot, it's hard, right? It's really hard. And then, like you said, on the back end, it's really hard to sweep. It's really hard to beat someone twice, but it's a lot easier when you win game 1. So I think, these teams are going into a doubleheader day knowing, okay, we got to give everything that we have to game 1, because then game 2, we can let our players just almost go into autopilot of like doing the same things and not having to switch of like, oh, we need to switch X, Y, and Z and all these mindset changes. So like, that's why a doubleheader is so hard, where in preseason, it's a different team. So it's easy to like close the page. It's easy to close the page and be like, we're on to the next, like flush it. It's fine. Let's go. Different team. Let's find a way to win. But against the same team, it's like, like facing in for me as a hitter, facing that same pitching coach. So yeah, we might be facing a different pitcher, but it's still the pitching coach that knows why you just went 0 for 4. And they're definitely going to still attack those weaknesses where like you might be able to get away with some things in a different opponent. So gosh, yes, doubleheaders are so hard when every game matters.
Oh, it takes me back to super regionals. Now I like that they have it to where it's essentially, if you have that if necessary game, it's on a third day. But twice when I went to super regionals, we won the first game on day 1, lost the second game on day 2, but then had to play that third game immediately after. And so then ended up losing. And by no means is that the only reason that happened. Let's be clear. But I do think like if you have that night to like, okay, let's sleep on it, let's turn the page, like it makes all the difference in the world to do that. Because I think, what are the stats? I don't even remember, but like vast majority of people who win game 1 in the super regionals go to the World Series. And then I obviously had the opposite experience. But I always take note of that as well when that happens with some of these teams.
Craziness.
It is. And I think Oklahoma State they have an identity as a program, but they've been trying to figure out their identity as a team this year specifically. And it seems like I remember talking to Rosie Davis in Clearwater, and they seem like they're playing the long game in the sense that they're going to take their lumps and they're trying to learn from them, but they're not overly concerned about some of the lumps that they're taking, if that makes sense. Like they're moving forward, like to be able to take that game 3 in the way that they did, for example, like shows some of that versus dwelling, I guess, on past situations. Like Ruby Malin was our national pitcher of the week recently for D1Softball, despite them having some tough battles along the way. So I just think for them, they're really looking towards, Oklahoma City. I think Rosie said their goal is to get to that last game because they've been to the World Series so many times in a row, but it's like, what's going to get us to that last game? Maybe some of these battles will. We'll see.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I still feel like there's so many more that we could talk about because there are.
I do want to touch on the Florida Texas A&M series.
Yes.
Quickly, because that was pretty insane. I think that obviously it was a very anticipated matchup. The number 4 team, number 3 team going at it. At Texas A&M, which, if you've played there, they've got the sugar daddies there sitting above your dugout yelling at you. And it's definitely a crazy place to play. The fans are really loud, but a fun place to play, right? Like the field is always immaculate. They do a great job, but it definitely feels, like your heart races a little bit. And they really put on a show. That game one was pretty nuts, pretty crazy. Obviously Texas A&M wins on a walk-off, and then Saturday, Florida turns around and mercies them, and definitely punches back. And then they show up again Sunday and have another great game, and Florida takes that one as well. So I thought that was huge for Florida to go on the road without Keegan Rothrock and win 2 out of 3 against a really good Texas A&M team, who they are just really gritty in the batter's box. Like, they really can do it all. They have speed that can kill you. They have power. They take extra bases. They just do a really good job. So for Florida to go in there without their ace and win 2 out of 3, and really they were like one play away from a sweep. Like, they had an inning there where it got a little ugly at the end. But they were really close to doing the whole thing without Keegan Rothrock. So I think that's a little scary for the rest of the country to know that they can win some really big series even without their ace and Keegan Rothrock, and don't know what's going on with Keegan, but hope that she gets back on the field quickly, because I would assume injury related, but I hope that she's okay and healthy, and that we get her back quickly and soon. But yeah, so I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, is that they were able to go in against a really elite offense, win 2 out of 3. I thought seeing Caitlin Oxley, their freshman, who they call Red, step up and start 2 of 3 games in your first SEC series after not playing the first couple weeks, showing up so big time in a crazy environment against a really good offense, and like acting like she had done it before. Kara Hammock came in that Sunday and like closed things out and had a huge outing out of her. So really they called on a lot of names this weekend, and you can't say there was few people that had multiple home runs. Reagan Walsh had a few home runs. Jocelyn Erickson, Mia Williams, Taylor Shoemaker had multiple names to shout out. So that's really awesome, like a really comfortable place to be as a Gator fan, of knowing that you're not relying on just one name. So to say all of these other names and not mention Keegan Rothrock in a big series win is pretty awesome for the Gators. So I think if you're a Gator fan like me, you're feeling pretty good right now with where they're at and how they were able to win 2 of 3 on the road to open SEC play. Big test coming up this weekend with Texas. So I think that was a really good prime for the week, but just wanted to touch on, because it was just a really good, every game was so good. Even the Mercy, even the 6th inning game when locked in at every pitch of just, you didn't know how quickly the game was going to turn, because it was really competitive and fun to watch.
Balance throughout the roster where you can win in different ways. What more can you ask for if you're Tim Walton and just all the players, the entire staff, everybody? That is huge. I'm so glad that you went into depth on that, because it really can't be overstated. Trisha Ford's teams always can rake too. Her and Jeff Harger, like what they do with the offense, not even just at A&M, but even previously at ASU, and they can hit. They can always hit. So yes, it's such an emphasis.
And they always look so fearless too. I think that that's been something that all of our hitters look like they're just scary in the box. I feel like, softball, this game, you ride the roller coaster, right? There's really high highs and really low lows, and hitting is really hard. And it's really hard to fake that confidence. And you never see that out of Trisha Ford's bunch. Like, they always look ready, like battle tested and ready. Like, they can figure it out. Have gritty at bats. They can really hit the ball and make stuff happen. They can create chaos. And it's not an awesome place to be if you're on defense, of never knowing what to expect.
Totally. And you said it, Florida and Texas. Like, are you kidding? I mean, this is one of the weekends that we all had circled on the schedule, right? Like when it first came out, but it's a top 3 matchup. I think it was Kendra Falby who said, on ESPN, she's like, if you're not watching, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? Because what else would you want to watch as a softball fan? This is, I think we're all going to be glued to the screen, keeping an eye on that one.
Yeah, and it's talk about that. This is going to be Texas's opening SEC weekend. So obviously they had that bye last week. So welcome to the SEC. Welcome to Gainesville, Florida. You're going to have some crazy fans, and it's going to be loud, and hopefully it's going to be hot and ready to welcome opponents. But yes, it will be crazy, and what a welcoming for the Texas Longhorns to start SEC play than playing in Gainesville, Florida against the Gators.
You're just thinking about Tegan Kavan throwing against these Florida hitter. Like there are so many things. Wow, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, hopefully we get us as fans get to see Keegan Rothrock go against Tegan Kavan. I think that is going to be quite the matchup to see them go at it and compete. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's like almost I feel like my arm is tugging to get to Gainesville this weekend to watch that in person, because I think it's going to be pretty insane. But we'll be able to see it all on ESPN, and I'm so excited.
Oh yeah, and Tim Walton, Mike White, just like personalities out there too, coaching at third base and everything too. There's just so many different factors that it's gonna be good TV, let alone good softball.
Hopefully it's good.
You're like, define good as a Gator alum.
Yeah.
Define good.
Yeah, define that for me.
Oh, it's hysterical. That's so funny. Oh man. Well, yeah,
Gosh,
the SEC.
I still have so many more matchups from the weekend on my list. I'll go through.
Let's keep going. Yeah, let's do it.
Clemson and Duke. I thought that was a crazy matchup. Obviously, Clemson taking game 1 in a run rule fashion. Duke comes back and wins game 2 and game 3. A lot of done without Cassidy Curd in the circle. I think Clemson had a really good plan against Cassidy Curd. And Clemson looked different to me this weekend. I think that they are finally finding their identity as a team. They're competing really well together, playing a little bit more like the OG Clemson that we knew, of just coming out there and competing and doing a good job of the little things right, but also just having some fearless at bats and getting after it. They were stringing things together. It just looked like a different team. They were competitive all 3 games. Definitely different than how they opened up the season. Tennessee wins 2 of 3 at Georgia. Those were crazy games. Georgia taking 1 game was huge for Georgia.
Yeah.
And then Oregon beating Florida State twice, not letting Florida State score any runs. They had won 2-0 and 1-0. So huge for that Oregon pitching staff to hold that Florida State offense to no runs. So, for all the pitching coaches out there and pitchers, if the other team does not score any runs, you win. So that's all you have to do is limit these amazing offenses to scoring 0 runs. Doesn't sound that hard. But then
it's not even girl math. It's just math.
Yeah. Like it's simple, really. Come on. And then Auburn getting swept by Mississippi State.
Yeah. Wow.
Was pretty crazy. Watching game 3 last night. It was pretty nuts. Definitely not the cleanest of softball at times, but really competitive, and props to Mississippi State capitalizing on some big mistakes and keeping the inning going, and good signs out of Mississippi State, because I feel like we haven't talked a ton about them, and I have had my eye on Auburn. They started the season really hot, and obviously with the Malvos taking over, really excited about that hire. So I thought that was really huge by Mississippi State, and a really big statement to open SEC play, sweeping a very good Auburn team at home.
Yeah. Okay. The energy. No, I mean, loved it all. The mic'd up Monday energy too. Watching Starkville for it to finish was a little extra something, right? And those SEC series where they have that last game on Monday, it's like all eyes are on those, because most of the other series have finished. So I agree with you. That was definitely a great one. And just to echo what you said about Oregon and Florida State. And for context here, like if we're looking at the offense and some of the weapons that Florida State has, Kennedy Harper's leading the ACC in multiple offensive categories, as one example, let alone the Michaela Edenfields and others, that are throughout the lineup. So the fact that the Oregon pitching staff, led by Lindsey Grine a lot this season, has been able to compete the way that they have. Yes, they did it at home at the Jane, but still very impressive. Regardless. And so I think interesting too, because then speaking of Mondays, they beat Abilene Christian 22-4 with a 15-run first inning. Lushar hit like 2 RBI triples in the same inning. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. But in between those, they also lost to Oregon State. So that rivalry still kind of in the mix at the same time. So Oregon is such an interesting team to me right now. And I will say for Oregon State, they snapped Oregon's 16-game win streak. Logan Houlihan threw a gem. She only gave up 6 hits, 8 strikeouts, no walks, which is huge, and just the 1 earned run. So it seemed like a therapeutic kind of win for the Beavers, especially because they were affected the most by the conference realignment and everything. But
Totally.
I think seeing some of those in-state and natural rivalries live on, we need it. And they're going to play a couple more times too. And I just think to see, Oregon gave us so much this weekend with the Florida State pair of games, Oregon State, and then even finishing it out with that crazy intense win against Abilene Christian. They're an interesting one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. One that I would add to all of the amazing ones that you already mentioned, and this is mainly because I was there in person. So I called the Syracuse-Stanford series. And I think I wanted to point this series out because this is when realignment gets really weird, right? I think people were struggling to wrap their minds around the fact that, okay, Syracuse and Stanford are playing a conference series. A New York team, right? Yeah, so weird. A New York team and a California team are playing in conference. So I was trying to figure out different ways to sort of tell the story. I'm like, okay, it's a coastal collision, right? It's like East versus West, New York, California. And if you think about the weather and those implications too, Syracuse hadn't even practiced on a real field yet this year, because of the weather in New York is just very different than it is out west. But also kind of convenient that both have colors as mascots. So as a Stanford alum, we're the Cardinal, the orange. I could appreciate that. So it felt like this like clash of colors, and then I'd say the last piece is it was like a battle of the Block S because the logos actually used to be almost identical.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yes. So before Stanford added the tree in their logo, which I love, I think it's great. It's unique to them. It was just a Block S very similar to Syracuse. So when I lived in Connecticut for like a year and a half, I'd walk around in my Stanford parka with the old S on it. And people would be like, oh, did you go to Syracuse? Because in certain lighting, maybe the red looks a little orange, whatever it is. So those types of things, you're like, okay, we can kind of create this new story within this conference. But the other part of that series in particular that I wanted to call out is there are some storylines that might not get the headlines, but that are still interesting. So Syracuse, for example, going into the weekend, they led the ACC in ERA. I don't know if most people would have realized that, right? It was a 1.38 ERA as a staff. And the individual leader also on staff at Syracuse too. And so it's the best start that they've had since 2011. The first 19 games, they were 16-3 before going to Stanford. And on the other side of it, Stanford led the ACC in batting average. So that's an interesting matchup, right? To see like the best pitching staff in terms of ERA, best offense in terms of batting average go head to head like that. I think, those are the types of things that I don't want us to lose sight of sometimes, because of course there are the huge matchups that we're always going to pay attention to. But like Syracuse as a squad, for example, like they're doing a lot of things under their head coach, Shannon Depking too, for us to keep an eye on as one example of many throughout the country.
Love it. Thanks for that insight, Jenna.
Yeah, of course. And if people are interested too, obviously everyone's excited about the football stadium at Stanford. So I did interview Jade Berry.
So cool.
Yes, after they got the sweep, Stanford did. Talked about hitting the ACC, but also competing and practicing in that football stadium. So if you're interested in that, take a look at our social channels because she gives some insight there. Oh my gosh, Amanda. Anything else? I mean, I could keep going, to be honest with you, but any big stuff top of mind?
No, I feel like I got it all out. Had my notes ready.
Nice. See, yeah, you were on it. I liked it. A game.
It's like there's so much I needed on paper this week. I really needed it on paper because there were so many good things that happened. Oh,
1,000%. One thing I'll do is shout out our other D1Softball national honorees of the week. Just briefly. So Alexis DeBoer is thriving at UW. And everybody was curious, right? When her dad is is taking the head coaching gig at Alabama, going from Washington to Alabama for the football program. They were wondering, is she going to go to Alabama? What's she going to do now? She stuck it out and stayed at UW, and she's, again, thriving. So she's our national player of the week this week. And we already mentioned freshman of the week earlier, but then Rutgers, Ella Harrison, D1Softball national pitcher of the week. 3 complete game shutouts, did not give up a single earned run, 34 strikeouts. And the opponents were hitting under 100 against her. Plus, in the mix, first career no-hitter with 16 strikeouts against North Dakota. So
that'll work.
Yeah, I think those performances, those 2, in addition to our freshman of the week that we mentioned earlier, important to call out. And then the last thing that our staff at D1 was keeping an eye on, really throughout the whole season, but especially this last weekend, I want to mention Boise State. So they had, in the 4 games they played over the weekend, they did play on Monday too, but over the weekend, 13 home runs from 6 different players in those 4 games. And they have been scoring double-digit runs in 12 of their first 23 games, so basically half. And their average margin of victory has been about 7 runs. So just keeping in mind like some of their offensive output, and then through Sunday, going into Monday, they were one of only 5 teams in the country in the top 50 RPI, undefeated at home and undefeated in true road games at the close of the weekend. The other ones, for context, Texas, OU, UCLA, Nebraska, all ranked teams. So just wanted to call, again, mid-major call out there for what they're doing out there in Boise.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, did we get through it, Amanda? Did we get through the week 5 recap? Barely. Survived.
So many good things. It was fun to go through all of it.
Oh, so fun. And it still feels like we're only scratching the surface, but there's still so much more to come. So I know we're excited for that. Well, with that, finally, I think it's time for the plays of the week.
Well, I'm going to lead us off again because I feel like that's just the trend for how this year has been going. So set the scene a little bit. This is, of course, from the Texas A&M Florida series. I'll let it play and then talk after.
Center field. And reaching over the wall to make the catch and save a home run is Kendra Falby. 1 run has scored, and then they'll make it a double play as Woolley tried to get home too. It was almost a grand slam.
Unbelievable from Kendra Falby, robbing a home run. I mean, a grand slam from Maya Perez, which would have been her 2nd home run on the day, by the way. So 1 out in the bottom of the 5th, tie ball game, bases loaded, huge swing out of Maya Perez. Kendra Falby reaches, and hard to do when it's not your home field as well.
Yes.
Like, just such a beautiful job, such a nice play by Kendra Falby. Not only grabbing that ball, securing and getting down, and then throwing a dart to Riley Holtorf, her getting it, throwing a perfect throw in to Jossie Erickson to get Coco Woolley, who was trying to score from 2nd, by the way.
Yes.
And she would have if it wasn't executed perfectly. So not only robbing a grand slam, but also getting a double play out of it, trying to get Coco Woolley, who was tagging up from 2nd. Much respect, by the way, to know like, hey, this ball is probably going to be caught by the center fielder. I'm going to tag on you because if I'm that base runner, I'm thinking, woohoo, I'm running. Like there's no shot that she's going to catch this ball. So they definitely know who Kendra Falby is. But huge play, obviously, from Kendra Falby. A&M goes on to win that game. But what a momentum shift. You think that you're going to go up by a big swing, and the Florida Gators say, no, not quite. But huge play by Kendra Falby. She continues to amaze me in center field. She's diving all over the place and making some pretty big plays. So definitely going to savor every moment of her being in center field for the Gators, because it's been really fun to watch her thrive in that position.
I mean, the literal perfect play. I told you too before this, like if you didn't pick it, I was going to be genuinely upset. I think, which I didn't think there was any way that you wouldn't. I had all the faith in you, of course, but I was like,
the only thing if it was like they had a big home run or if there was another big offensive moment. So it's crazy that I'm choosing a defensive moment. It was just too good. It was too good not to choose. Just incredible.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that before. I was going to ask you too what your thoughts were on tagging from second base. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah, so do I. Some people are like, why would she do that? It's like, well, if it's a home run, she gets to go anyway, you know?
She's so fast. She's so fast that she's going to be able to, she can do just unreal things, but also talk about like a crazy moment. What are the odds of like the crowd going nuts? You rob a grand slam, having enough feel and like sense of the next play to get in and throw a good throw to Riley Holtorf and then have her throw a perfect throw into home, because that's what it takes with someone like the speed of Coco Woolley. It took perfection in the execution category out of the Gators in order to make that happen. And so you have to roll your dice with that. I think you sent her all day. I loved it. And I even love the fact even more that the Gators were ready for it and executed the play to perfection. I mean, it took, obviously the catch is what we all love and you know, is throwing fireworks all over social media. But really what I love is the throw to Riley, Riley's throw to Jocelyn and Jossie's tag at home. I think it was just done so perfectly. And you can't practice that stuff, right? Like you practice it all the time, but really like when the fans are screaming and the lights are on and it's a big moment, a tie ball game and yada, 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 the heart is racing a little bit different than it is at 2:00 in the afternoon with no fans in the stands. So really comforting to see them like show up and execute it to perfection in the biggest of moments in a big SEC team. I mean, a big SEC game.
Yes. Yeah. No, you said it. You covered it all. Mic drop. You did it.
Thanks, Jenna.
I mean, difficult to follow that, obviously, but I have to. So for context too, we've talked about before just with catchers, how much they have to manage on the field. So mine is related to catching. It is a catcher, my play of the week. And how much they have to do, not only working with the pitchers, but running the defense as well and having the awareness around them. So just keeping that in mind as we look at this play from the Stanford-Syracuse series.
In the air again. Foul territory again. Clemens colliding there with Cowan. Did she hold on to it? The Cardinal fans are going wild as she squeezes it.
Or apologize as well to Rick Cowan behind the plate because he was just right in her line. She had no other choice but to take a beeline to that ball. That's great work. You see how she locates it, does not take her eye off of it that time.
I mean, just locked in. Locked in.
Get out of the way.
Right? That part hurt a little bit. He was cool afterwards. Like, he wasn't like, mad at her, of course. You know.
Yeah, there's nothing to be mad at. Get out of the way.
Yes. But I just love that she just no hesitation. And the fact that it was on the football field, by the way, like in the football stadium, we're like, can we call Stanford football? Like, this was so on point, cool. So poetic. Just made a lot of sense. Felt right. And right before this, too, even more context, there was a very similar foul ball in a similar spot that she went for all out and just missed it. So that when you come back and do this, it was a little extra sweet.
So great.
Yes. And her dad was there to watch, too. You know, like she's a senior, all of those types of things. So that was awesome.
So good.
Also, she and the first baseman, freshman Joey Economidis, you know, they picked a girl off at first earlier in the series, too. So just locked in defensively. And also that clip that we just saw, ESPNW actually shared it and posted it. So I thought that was cool too. Anytime that our, you know, sport gets a little more elevated coverage, we're here for it.
Yes. Awesome.
So, you know, not a grand slam robbing double play, but still cool.
Still cool. Still very cool. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I think we picked pretty good ones this week. I'm actually really, really happy with our choices.
We did. We did.
And
lots to choose from too.
So much to choose from. Yes. And with that being said, more to choose from too, as we picked the win and whiff of the week.
All right. Again, I have our win of the week. We'll let it show up on here while I talk, but Coach Allie Habits returning to Tuscaloosa as obviously as ULL head coach, but she was a longtime assistant at Alabama. So obviously a place that definitely feels like home to her. And obviously those fans and the people were so welcoming and excited to have her back. But also the biggest win of her first season as the head coach, with also securing a win in Tuscaloosa. So they beat Alabama 4-3, but obviously a really special moment for her and her family. And I'm sure for Patrick Murphy and all of her former players, just to see her there in Tuscaloosa was just a really cool little homecoming moment for her now that she's leading the Ragin' Cajuns, but also really cool for her to go in there and beat them. Obviously, you always want to win against your former school. So really cool for her to see her there and then also secure the win as well. That's my win of the week.
A great one. And when you say longtime assistant at Alabama, 25 seasons, like long time. Very long time. Yes. But then, Louisiana is her alma mater. So it's like, these are the two places that feel like home to her. And obviously, like you said, super classy. Alabama honoring her before the game. You see like Murph with the flowers and the hugs and all of that stuff. It's a great moment.
Yeah. Super special. Love to see it.
Love to see it. One thing that we don't love to see is related to our whiff of the week. So before we get into the video for it, basically terrible news coming out that Alina Garcia, freshman shortstop at UCLA, is out for the season due to injury. And I would say that the whiff of the week is just all season ending injuries too. Just anytime this happens to a player, it's awful. So it's an absolute whiff. And I remember we got to see her play in person too. The D1Softball squad did at Mary Nutter, and she's just so high energy. And she had been making a ton of awesome plays this year already as a freshman. So while we won't get to see that the rest of this season, I think it makes sense to give her a moment, despite the fact that the injury is the whiff. Her plays and what we can look forward to later in her career, we'll give that a moment.
Runs in the opening inning. On a hop, backhanded by Garcia, and makes a strong play across the diamond to get Talon Edwards.
Last season, yet they still made it to the World Series.
Great play on the run. It's short by Alina Garcia, making it look easy. 2 down in the 5th.
Trying to field a team and prepare for this season, and getting on top of that one. Nice backhand grab from Alina Garcia. Strong throw over to first. And the solid defense for UCLA.
Certainly you're going to see a lot of ground balls with that drop ball that she throws. This one moving over into the 5-6 hole, goes down to her knees to field it.
Fisher is the first ever signee for UCLA out of the state of Oregon. Nicely charged by Garcia to get Reasoner. 50th pitch of the game from Addison Fisher out to short. Alina Garcia, freshman, making the play for out number 1.
Winfield in. And that one through the glove of Bragg, but a great play by the freshman in time to get White. So Garcia making some fantastic plays in the infield.
We were just talking about her defense and how smooth she is over at shortstop. Reading the ricochet off of Kanaya Bragg, goes right to her.
So many more highlights that you could point out, but I love that one, that package that UCLA put together themselves, just with all of her highlights in such a young career. She's barely a freshman. So we are wishing her the best in terms of recovery, and anyone else going through a similar situation, because what the win of the week at some point, or the win of next year, will be is hopefully to see some of this amazing talent back at it and competing like they love to do.
Yes. And in a weird way, thankful that it happened early on. Obviously, she can still redshirt and regain this year. Thank goodness, because yes, she's been so fun to watch, and she deserves 4 full years of healthy playing career. So wishing her well, and hopefully we'll see her back ready to go next year.
Yes. And in terms of personality, before I forget, So I did get a chance to interview her at Mary Nutter, and this is on our social channels too, if you guys want to take a look. But we talked about all the shortstops in UCLA's history. If you look back at Dot Richardson, Natasha Watley, there's so many. I can't even name them all because I'll miss somebody inevitably because there's so many. They're just a shortstop factory. And I asked her what it was like to be sort of added to that list this year. And she said she had so much respect for that history, but she also said she wanted to be the next Alina Garcia and be herself.
Oh,
and so I think that energy is really cool. That balance of like respect for the past, but like making it your own now and in the future. So even more reason for us to be rooting for her moving forward.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, the win and whiff of the week are in the books. But in terms of what's next, as usual, the D1 team is going to be all over the place. So Shelly Carlin will be at Easton Stadium watching UCLA. It's their first ever Big Ten series in program history. She's actually throwing out the first pitch on Saturday, which I might get in trouble for saying, but that's okay. If you guys want to take a look and watch that. Eric Lopez, one of our In the Circle co-hosts, he's calling the Big 12 series as Arizona State visits UCF. I think that should be a really interesting one to keep our eyes on. And actually, Victor Anderson, his co-host, is calling the midweek doubleheader at Stetson. ASU is going there on their way to Orlando for the Big 12 series later on. So that's on Wednesday. And then I'm going to be doing a bunch of stuff. So 3 sports in 3 days for me. Gymnastics Friday, softball Saturday, baseball Sunday. Stanford is hosting Nevada on the Saturday that I will be there, and as well as Sunday. So a little homecoming for Vic Hayward, too, who's from the Bay Area. Yeah.
Love it.
An interesting matchup. Nevada's off to a nice start. Them playing Stanford, which they do often in most seasons. They make it on the schedule. So that should be a good one. And then I will say, for all the D1 baseball enthusiasts out there, Stanford baseball is coming off a ranked series win over number 4 North Carolina last weekend. They're hosting Duke this weekend. So that's the game that I will be on Sunday as well. So for those crossover folks, like, me and Amanda, honestly, we like D1 baseball stuff too.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on that.
Yes. Here for it. Here for it all.
All of it. And I know we already said it, but just to reinforce, we're looking forward to that Texas-Florida series. Let's be real.
Absolutely we are. Let's go.
Let's go. And some other fun ones too, like Oregon, UW, like they have their own sort of Pacific Northwest rivalry. Stevie Hansen transferred from Oregon to Washington, so those types of things and much more throughout the country. All right. Well, if you stuck around this long, we do have a little treat for you again. A nice discount code for all of your D1 softball subscriptions, monthly, annual, whatever you got going, whatever you want. Use the code season25 to get 25% off. So much good information. We only scratched the surface. It gets even deeper with all the content that we have on the website and beyond. So season 25 for all you folks, if you're interested. And then other than that, let us know as usual what kind of content you guys are looking for, whether that be for things like the website, for our podcast here. What do you guys want to know more about? We're willing to talk about it. But other than that, thank you for joining us again, as usual. And, as you guys all know, my goat of a co-host, Amanda Lorenz, for both of us. Couldn't be more grateful for you.
Thank you for listening. See you guys next week.